Rachael, welcome to Hope, Healing and Lipstick.
This is so exciting. It is actually my first proper
For
live.
everyone who doesn't know Rachael, Rachael is a relationship expert for the dating app eharmony. And in addition,
Indeed.
she also works as a personal coach, helping smart, successful women master their dating skills with her new course, Destination Love. So welcome, Rachael. And
Lovely.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lee Pycroft. I started my career as a makeup artist and now I'm a psychotherapist. And I was really interested to talk to Rachael because Rachael, one of the things she deals a lot with her client base is people that go into relationships that have what's called an anxious attachment style. Now, I have to say, Rachael, I'm going to put my hands up right now. And for anyone that's been following me for a while, you'll know that I absolutely was an anxious attachment style. And if I don't watch myself and I don't monitor that part of myself, I can very easily slip into that. And it caused me an awful lot of difficulties when it came to relationships and dating. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk to you tonight about what is an anxious attachment style? How would you know you're an anxious attachment style before I blurt out my life story?
We were talking about this earlier. An anxious attachment is something we've both experienced, haven't we, in our lives? So yes. I guess it's something close to our heart. So an anxious attachment style means it's basically how you connect and relate to people. In this context, in romantic relationships and dating. That's what we're sort of focusing on. And clues as to whether you are anxious are things like you sometimes feel in relationships that your needs are not being met, but you're afraid to say so. You're not very good at setting boundaries in a relationship and asking for your needs to be met. Yeah. And sometimes you might be someone that decides to be needless and wantless in order to keep the relationship going, particularly if you're in a relationship with someone who's quite distant and what we call avoidant.
Yes. Yeah.
Done that.
Note the nervous laughter. Don't know that one at all. And so what is the difference between anxious attachment and avoidant then? So if you're anxious and you have a tendency maybe to put others' needs first, a strong desire to be in the relationship, and do you think a hard time being alone sometimes? You feel sort of like you need to work really hard to be in the relationship kind of thing. Would that resonate? Maybe comes from low self-esteem, seeking approval a bit.
Absolutely.
And so for the anxious attachment, it seems like a bit of a paradox. You would go for someone that's avoidant, but tell me a bit about that.
So at the core of someone that's got anxious attachment, they fundamentally believe sometimes I'm not truly lovable just as I am. And someone who's avoidant at the core will think intimacy can be absolutely suffocating. It can be too much. But both of those people will deep down fear rejection and abandonment. The reason that we often find that they're attracted to each other, because actually the statistics suggest that the most common relationship style for an anxious attachment is an avoidant, which is ironic because it's actually the last person they need to be with, is because, well, it's familiarity. So if we're anxious, we probably grew up in a family where there was a distant parent or caregiver, not necessarily physically, but just somebody that we had to work hard to get our needs met with, to get their attention and to feel that kind of love consistently. So as anxious attachment people, I should say, we're used to performing to get our needs met. And we're very good at identifying someone avoidant and hooking them in, because that's what we've learned to do growing up, potentially.
So is it kind of familiarity as much as anything, isn't it? It's a sort of pattern of being familiar, even though it's painful.
But yes, and it's also something called confirmation bias, which I know sounds a bit psycho-pop. But what that means is for both the anxious attachment style and the avoidant, well, most of us actually are looking unconsciously when it comes to intimacy to confirm our core beliefs. We don't know we're necessarily doing that, but that's the way we're wired. So an anxious person is seeking out someone who they can repeat their sort of childhood patterns with and what they believe to be true. So if they think I'm not entirely lovable, I have to perform to get my needs met, people always leave, or relationships are hard to maintain, then unconsciously they're going to look to prove that that's true. And I know that sounds a little bit controversial, but that is one psychological theory that psychologists have.
And so in terms of both people, whether you're anxious attachment or you're avoidant, both parties really suffer from fear of rejection. And I certainly remember when I was really struggling with anxious attachment, I barely even realized that's what I was doing, but kept going to these people that were avoidant. And when it came to sort of trying to resolve that, it got to the point for me where it got so bad and so uncomfortable. But I thought there's one common denominator in all of this. And do you know who it was? It was me. And it's that kind of realization that how can you start moving from being really in an anxious attachment style where things are very hard work, where there's the roller coaster of kind of being in the relationship and maybe it cools off because the avoidance sort of pulls back, and then you feel compelled to go after them. And you think they're the one, and you think they're the only person that you're ever going to have a relationship with. So you go straight into catastrophic thinking, right? But how would you kind of start to advise a client of yours to start noticing whether, or what the first signs would be to sort of notice perhaps red flags or behaviors that are not helpful for them, and behaviors that they could start to sort of really exercise in themselves to start to shift away from that? What would be the first step people could take?
So if we're looking at red flags in terms of the relationship choices they make, the first part of that, the red flags would be things like, and this is as early as the first date, really, someone that doesn't turn up on time, someone that doesn't text when they say they're going to text, someone that gives mixed signals, massive red flag and mixed signals for someone who's anxious, because that suggests the other person has avoidant issues. Somebody that, if you're in a relationship or you're dating someone who, when they're really stressed, they kind of remove themselves from you and they go into their, if you're a woman, perhaps they go into your man cave. But, if they sort of pull away, when things become difficult or heated or too intense, even sometimes it can happen when you've had like the most amazing time with somebody, you've had, say, a wonderful weekend away. And you've been really close and you've been sharing from the heart, and then suddenly the person that you're with draws away. It's almost like a reflex of like, that was a bit too much, I now need to empty. So that can be a sign that they can only cope with so much intimacy and they need to go and kind of process. So the red flags are there quite early on. But my clients, who I love dearly, some of them that struggle with this do the opposite of, in a way, they try and figure it out and think about tactics to pull that avoidant partner back in, or the person they're pursuing, instead of looking after themselves, which brings me to the second point, looking after yourself. So what's really attractive to people, I'm sure you'd agree, is confidence and self-esteem. And it's a bit of a sort of paradox, because those of us who have battled with confidence and self-esteem, and I have in my life over the years, we want to magic ourselves into someone confident, but we're dealing with a lot of emotions that we're probably not even aware we're carrying. So I think it's about gentle things like, we were talking earlier about this, it's like leaning into your emotions, putting time aside, put the other person down mentally for a minute, focus on your healing. So take some time out to breathe, do a bit of meditation, or just sit quietly and actually shut your eyes and notice the feelings. What color are they? Be curious about them. Where are they in the body? I'm talking about the kind of fear and the adrenaline, and learn to make friends with them. Learn to understand that they're just feelings. And they're not going to destroy you. We spend our lives trying to run away from unpleasant feelings, don't we? God, and as you know, the more you push them down, the more that they'll spring up. It's that ability to be able to emotionally regulate and self-soothe. And I remember when I was sort of retraining myself, realizing I was the common denominator in these relationships that were really not healthy for me. One of the first things I learned was to self-soothe. And to rather than look to this other person in these very intense relationships, thinking that the intensity meant that the relationship was right,
But of course, intensity doesn't mean the relationship's right. You know,
Damn.
you can't operate, you know, firework can't maintain that kind of intensity. It has to peter out, and life's not like that. It's interwoven with the ability to be able to have intense periods that feel a bit dull, periods of just normality. It's being able to accommodate all of that. And when I kind of learned to self-soothe rather than looking to the other person, that as long as you do what I think you should do, then I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. This is, completely. You know? This is about control, isn't it? And often we think if I could just fix the other person, get them to understand me and communicate with me on my terms, everything will be all right. And every couples counsellor, and you're a therapist, I'm sure you have this, that I've ever spoken to about this, say couples that come for therapy, each one thinks if I just fix the other, we'll be okay. But we need to learn, as you say, to self-soothe, to take care of our own needs first, in order to kind of like, I guess, express more of a calm, gentle energy that is infectious.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you were saying also about the sort of boundary part, about speaking up and asking for your needs to be met. And I think it's interesting because the initial tendency is to not speak up because it's so incredibly comfortable. And then, as you say, you're needless and wantless. And certainly, can you speak to a bit about how can you learn to speak up? Because I know that was something that I really had to grapple with myself, and that was almost you know, an exercise in and of itself to do that, to be able to speak up when not knowing what the outcome was going to be, but being able to tolerate that uncertainty around that. What would you say about that, and how could someone sort of set themselves up to kind of start to sort of speak up more, you know, slowly and gently, to sort of stretch that window of tolerance a bit?
Yes, like you say, it's the window of tolerance. It's learning, it's small steps first, isn't it? In coaching, we often talk about not eating the whole elephant at once. You have to eat the elephant piece by piece. It's a bit of a strange term, but it kind of works in coaching. So it's about simple, you know, micro steps. So it's practicing expressing your, like, I would like this, or I would appreciate that, but not the blame game. So
huge point, Rachel.
It's really easy to fall into, like, if you could do this, or if you could phone me at 6 o'clock on the dot, then I know you're going to phone me and then I can relax. It's really about us owning our anxiety too, and communicating with the smaller stuff. Like you say, it might be something about, you know, I'd really appreciate it. It helps me feel good about the evening if you can be on time, you know, things like that. What are your suggestions? Because you work on this a lot.
Yeah, so it would be something like, you know, it's never about the person. We're never blaming the person. We're talking about a behavior. So when you don't show up on time, I experience this. Is there something we can do to organize that we both show up on time? What would you feel about that? What do you think about that? So it's that kind of thing. You know, when you don't call on time, what I experience is this. So I'm not saying, you know, when you don't call on time, you're a bleep, you know, or, you know, this kind of thing. I'm just saying what my experience is. Now, the other person might not agree with me. And this is something I really had to
that happens a lot.
exercise when I met my current partner, who I've been with a long time now, who's you know, he was actually, interestingly, when I met him, because I've done so much sort of group therapy and so much work on myself.
Same.
The whole exercise was about speaking up, not about the outcome. So the exercise was just exercising that muscle of stake in the ground for that boundary setting, for being able to articulate myself in a way that was respectful, that was, I was able to emotionally regulate myself and articulate what it is I needed. Now, he may not agree, or she may not agree, whoever your partner is, but the point is I was able to express that. And that was where the shift started to happen. And rather than twisting myself into a situation where, as long as I was doing what the other person thought I should be doing, or I thought I was behaving in a way I thought that would be appealing to them, because you said something really interesting, Rachel, that it's actually about being honest. Which I thought was a really nice reframe.
Yes. So, I mean, one of the things, a lot of coaches out there will do these courses like How to Win Back an Ex or How to Keep Someone Interested. And I honestly would just say, please steer clear of these kinds of courses, because actually this is about being honest. If you can be honest, like you say, when you do this, it makes me feel, or I feel, not it makes me, I feel. So it's very much the I. If we can do that, then we empower ourselves. And regardless, in longer term, this person that you're with may not be willing to play ball with you. But if they're really entrenched in being avoidant and staying in that stuff, then you're not compatible. And it's good to know that sooner rather than later.
It's all data, isn't it?
Yeah. The problem is with trying to manipulate and hang on to people who we're not compatible with is that we can't sustain it. We talked about this before. It's like the firework. It's like the camouflage behavior of I will be needless and wantless, or I will pretend I don't care, or I will freeze them out back. So I'm just not going to answer the phone for 2 days. I've done this before. I'm just going to let it ring. I'm going running, whatever. And actually, am I relaxed during that 2 days? Am I having a nice time? I have to kind of shut down part of my personality because I'm an empath. I'm not someone that's good at being cold and punishing people. So was that the bit you were referring to?
Yes, absolutely. And someone just asked actually if you could speak a bit more to.
Put my glasses on.
Someone just asked actually in the questions. If you could speak a bit more to leaning into the emotions, what does that look like? What does that mean in sort of practical terms? I think there's a fine balance between when we become so inwardly focused, you can become consumed by emotions and sort of navel gazing, and people. It's like people who are confident. They're confident because they're out doing things rather than thinking about doing things. So I think that what would you say about being able to experience?
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So what would you say about sort of leaning into emotion, experiencing emotion without it being to the point where it becomes something you just end up being consumed by and too much?
Yeah, I'm with you.
There's always that kind of, there's truth in everything, right? But it's finding the balance. What would you say that would look like?
So yes, this is true. And often if you're feeling really heightened emotions, you can't be leaning into those all the time because you wouldn't function. You wouldn't be able to go to work or cook a meal or do anything much, particularly if you're really sort of at rock bottom. So what I used to do, what worked for me, this would be often at times in my life when there was drama or feelings that I was finding really hard to cope with, I would actually give myself time out. So I would apportion time, as I say earlier, in my day. It might be if I was, say, working in an office or around people, I would say, right, I'm going to go to the the ladies, quietly, on the quietest floor for 10 minutes and do breathing work. And when I say lean in, I mean like we often fear that our emotions, when they're really painful and negative, they're going to consume us and we're going to sort of like just fall apart. But actually, if you can learn to say to yourself, they're just feelings, breathe, shut your eyes and literally feel where they are in the body. The other thing that I would recommend is the tapping solution. So that's tapping on meridians. So that's an app that you can download that really helps soothe yourself. Communicating with really good friends that you trust who are objective is another way of processing feelings and getting an objective perspective on whether you're overreacting or not. Exercise, I have to say this, I became addicted to cardio in midlife. Like when I was younger, I was always skiving off PE. But I've found, it's true, so many clinical studies now show that if you do aerobic exercise, and I mean raising your heart rate, it has a profound effect on mood management and it reduces anxiety long-term dramatically. So I would say, even if it's 10 minutes, if you're not a runner, take the bike out, do some sort of yoga that's got a little bit of zhuzh in it, should I say, not too many slow moves, a few fast moves. But so that's kind of the practical side of it. But I'm also picking up on the point that you made about like, there's almost that thing of, do we become self-obsessed if we constantly go into our own feelings? And this is why I always say to my clients, in order to sort of get confident to meet people, to date, or to be in a relationship, you need to have a meaningful life of your own that regulates your emotions. So that's about what we call top lines sometimes. It's about hobbies that connect you to other people and things, that take you out of your own ego and out of your own way. And it's so important. Like, it's not Netflix. I mean, Netflix is great for escapism, but that's not going to help you process much. It's about finding something. I joined a salsa class in January. I wasn't the best at it, but what I liked about it most was the people.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and just connecting with people outside here. You know.
Yeah.
So,
And
what do you think?
I think when you take it down, and anyone that's followed me for a while will know I talk a lot about sort of some deep psychological needs that we all have. And when we can get our needs met independently and we can meet each other's needs in relationship, then that will help us feel more emotionally balanced. So, you know, if you're an anxious attachment style, the chances are you're not going to feel safe, in your body particularly, or in relationships. You're looking for people, places and things that will help you maintain a sense of safety. Think using soothing rituals that will help you calm down. You know, for me, it was like, you know, breathing techniques. It was like being in nature. It was a furry blanket. It was getting enough sleep. It was eating the right nutrients, making sure my circadian rhythm was set, which is a whole other conversation. But, you know, like you talking about salsa, you know, you've got right there, you're learning something firstly, right, which is focusing outwards. So you have to learn something. So you've got a sense of community, you've got a sense of connection, right?
Yeah,
you're
really important.
And a sense of also attention. To give and receive attention, which is like a form of an emotional nourishment.
And touch.
So all of these, when you go out and you do something to fuel yourself, you know, we can help and feel more stable within ourselves, but also we've got more to talk about. And we're not overly focused on this one thing,
on the relationship
being the ticket to the golden ticket that's going to make our lives great, because that's also too much for anyone to take on. You know,
completely. And this is often that when relationships become too insular, then funnily enough, we've done lots of work at eHarmony with Relate, the counselling charity. We've done loads of stuff with them and it's fascinating. And one of their counsellors said to me that it takes, you know how they say it takes a village to raise a child? It takes a whole community to support a relationship. You know, you need your family, you need your friends, you need your hobbies. It's like you could chart it on a diagram, you know, all these different areas, you know, these different kind of touch points for well-being and feeling confident. And then there's the relationship at the heart. But without that, a relationship cannot sustain that kind of intensity. No. I mean, good luck. You know, maybe it does, but I would imagine it's quite up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember sort of hearing someone say, you know, security isn't about something lasting forever. It's about knowing who you are and where you are within yourself, you know. So it's really about having that inner stability, that sort of sense of, you know, friendship and respect and admiration with the other person, but within that sort of that security, maintaining that security within yourself that can help just start to move you away from the anxious attachment style, flexing your muscle, that internal muscle of setting boundaries and speaking up and getting your needs met, and being able to step away from something, you know, which I think, Rachel, is an interesting one, because it's like, you know, when we can, you know, sometimes I sort of think, you know, I speak to some clients and there's a rush to the altar, like once I'm married or once I'm sort of, you know, in this secure relationship and everything's all right. But of course, you know, relationship is constantly going to take nourishing anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean,
it's a live thing, you know.
Yeah, the good news is there's lots of lovely people out there, and you can find a meaningful relationship. The bad news is you can find a relationship, because often people think once I'm in a relationship, I'm going to feel great, and then they get into a relationship, and once they're past the initial endorphin rush and you know, the hot passion, shall we say, I'll keep it clean, and things begin to plateau a little bit. Conflicts come up. You realize that some of your values are not in alignment. You realize that there are some incompatibilities, and that can be incredibly, and then all your stuff comes up. I mean, it's like a horror show sometimes. All that stuff. No, but it's true. Like, I like to think I'm a really kind of quite a well recovered person, done a lot of work on myself. If I get into a relationship, there are sides of me that can come out that I didn't even know were hiding in there. Like, they just pop out like Jack in the Box, and I'm like, who is this? Who is this person? But the more self-care I do, and that's even more important when I'm in a relationship, the better I can handle the ups and downs. Can I just make one other point, Lee, while I remember it? It is, you know, we were talking about red flags and the dating pool.
Yes.
Just what people say to me, a lot of my clients say to me is like online dating, for instance, is tough because there's lots of people that are not authentic or they ghost me or it's just bad behavior and it makes me anxious.
Someone's
Like I don't
someone's
have.
just saying, Rachel, her actually thought of dating again fills me with total dread. So,
There you
so you're
go.
going to fill us with some hope now. Get ready for
Well,
everyone.
in a way, the bad news first.
Yeah.
Prepare yourselves. Well, as I said, people say to me a lot, clients and people that come to our, dating app. Obviously, we do lots of research, and they say, there's a lot of bad behavior on the apps. There's ghosting, there's negging, negative comments where you put people down. There's benching where you kind of string people along. It's a jungle.
Benching.
Yeah, we could do a whole one on dating terms. I'll help you out with that. And that is partly because you're not imagining it necessarily. The truth is, according to clinical studies, about 25% of the population generally are avoidant attachment style. So they have to put in some distance to cope with intense emotions. They can be inconsistent. They're not always clear communicators, and they're not very good at setting relationship goals because they don't like feeling trapped. So a lot of those people, a higher proportion of them are in the dating pool than not, because there might be 25% generally in the population, but more of them go in and out of relationships because they can't sustain the intimacy. Yeah. So they keep reappearing on the dating app. So as we said earlier, for anyone that's just joined, you have to be a little bit strategic about dating. It's obviously something that can be quite spiritual and lovely. And my mission as a coach is to help people really enjoy dating. Like dating should not be like a dirty word. It should be something we enjoy. But if somebody is giving you those mixed signals, if somebody is not texting or turning up or just messing you around, I really implore you to move on. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's their stuff. And then in order to have a good experience in online dating, honestly, I would tend to go for an app that tends to, be a bit better at matching than the quick swipe. But I don't want to be, telling people where they choose to date. I suppose the good things to look out for are somebody that you can clearly communicate with about what you're looking for. Sense of humor is a hugely desirable trait.
Yeah.
And there are little tricks. We could do a whole session on this. Like I would state what you want and need. I would put lots of pictures on your profile because for every extra picture you put up, you get up to 10% more interest, more traffic to your profile.
Wow. Is that like an algorithm thing then?
Yeah, it's an algorithm thing. Yeah. And well, it's not just an algorithm, it's just also that people like lots of photos.
Okay.
So it works.
Yeah.
But we've measured it. The other thing is, and we've touched on this before, when you go on, so when you come to online dating and you feel that sense of overwhelm, or dating offline, whatever that looks like for you, it's micro steps. It is not, I've got to find someone now, I've got to sieve through these people and get a relationship by the summer, or married with kids. It's about, I always say to people, keep it light, keep a bit of detachment, keep your options open, because if one person turns out to be a dud date, another one will re-inspire you, and you'll realize that it wasn't you, it was the And but the other thing is, first dates, keep them simple. So all you need to do is meet for a coffee. That's it. That will help you get an idea of whether you have rapport, whether you get on, you want to meet up again. And I think you said, Lee, your first date, was it in a pub or something? And then you ended up...
I've got a funny story for anyone that's watching, you see. So this is my version of hope. So after having lots of horrible relationships, years of not dating at all and just going to group therapy and just figuring out, where this pattern had started and sort of really re-educating myself and my nervous system of how to feel safe and how to look for a healthy relationship. Anyway, then I did go on actually match.com. And I remember actually saying a little prayer, just sort of saying, show me something that reflects all the work I've done. And I thought, I was a single mother at the time. I thought, well, I'm never away from my kids. I was with them 24/7. I thought, well, maybe the person will live close by. It will just be easy. I just sort of let it go. And I was really sort of quite regimented about how often I would go on the app, and I would go on maybe once a week for a few hours, this kind of thing. Anyway, then 3 months later, I get a message into my inbox, and this person starts chatting. And it turns out that he's moved into a new development that was across the road. And so we met down at my local pub for a coffee for like half an hour.
I love that.
And that was it. And we just started chatting. And I thought, well, I'll go for a coffee. And it's just keeping expectations low. And I just thought, I'll show up and I'll just be interested to know who this person is. And that was about it.
Yeah.
And there was,
you got curious.
I was curious.
You got curious.
Yeah. And
and
and we became friends really first.
Yeah. And I had a lovely relationship with somebody I met online, actually. And again, I went in with very modest expectations, not negative ones, but just like, I'll just see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then again, you've brought up something else, which is a really good tip for anyone that's in this field. Pace. I always talk about pace. Pace yourself. So don't binge on the dating apps. You know, put the dating app down, give yourself an allotted time to go on it, and limit that so that you get the best out of it. And also, if you're talking to 10 people at once, it can just be too much and you lose interest in all of them. So it's just pace and being selective. And then keeping the first date really simple.
Such a lovely amount of information you've given us, and tools.
And I've put everything in.
You do. Lots of hope, lots of healing, and lots of fun, and the lipstick part. For joining, everybody. And next Tuesday, 6 p.m. will be Hope, Healing and Lipstick again. And I hope you'll join us. All right, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.